Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're diving into Noam Chomsky and some excerpts you've sent in from his lectures on language and knowledge.
Yeah, Chomsky, his ideas are always interesting.
Definitely always shaking things up in linguistics.
Yeah, he really challenges how we think about things.
So this should be fun.
It should be. Get ready to explore, what language even is,
Yeah.
how we learn it,
Right.
and what it tells us about being human.
All right.
Okay, so Chomsky takes on this common idea that language is just like any other skill.
Like riding a bike.
Yeah, like playing the piano.
Right, we practice, we get better.
Exactly. But he uses this really interesting case to kind of disrupt that idea.
Oh, okay.
It involves this Spanish speaker, Juan, who had an injury and totally lost his ability to speak and understand Spanish.
Like a severe aphasia or something.
Yes. But here's the thing. When Juan recovered, his Spanish came back perfectly. If language were just a skill, wouldn't he have had to relearn it piece by piece?
Yeah, that's true. It's almost like riding a bike. You might be wobbly at first, but you don't have to relearn the whole thing.
That's a great analogy. Chomsky's arguing that the fact that Juan's Spanish was fully restored points to a deeper system.
Okay, so there's something more going on than just practice.
Right. Something
Yes.
more fundamental than just a skill.
So what does he call this deeper level?
He calls it Plato's problem.
Plato's problem. Whoa, that sounds pretty philosophical.
It is. It's this ancient mystery of how kids learn language so fast
Right.
and so effortlessly.
Yeah.
It seems like they learn more than they possibly could from their limited experience.
Yeah. How do they figure out grammar rules that no one's directly taught them?
Exactly. It's amazing to watch. My kids do it all the time.
I know, it's like magic.
Chomsky says the magic is inside us.
Okay.
That humans have this built-in language faculty.
Well, language faculty.
Yeah, specific system in the brain
Wow.
that makes language acquisition possible.
So we're actually hardwired for language?
In a way, yes.
Like it's part of our DNA.
This language faculty comes loaded with these basic principles, like a blueprint for language.
Interesting. So how does that work?
Think of it like a switchboard with all these switches.
Switchboard.
Yeah.
Okay.
Each switch can be set in different ways.
Uh-huh.
This blueprint, which Chomsky calls universal grammar, is like a system of these switches.
So everyone has the same basic wiring,
Right.
but the programming varies depending on what language you're exposed to.
Precisely. And here's where it gets really interesting. Chomsky says there are limits to what we can program.
Limits.
Yeah, he introduces this idea of unlearnable languages.
Unlearnable languages. What does that even mean?
Okay, imagine languages that break the basic rules of universal grammar. Our brains just couldn't handle them, even if we were exposed to them.
We wouldn't be able to learn them.
Right. It'd be like trying to fit square pegs into round holes.
So even with tons of exposure, our minds would just hit a wall.
Exactly. Chomsky argues these unlearnable languages just wouldn't work with our brains.
Wow. So there are actually limits to what we can learn, even when it comes to something as basic as language.
It makes you wonder, are there ways of thinking out there that we just can't access
That we can't even imagine.
because of how our brains are wired?
Now that's a mind-blowing thought. So how do we actually see this hidden structure of language?
How do we see this universal grammar in action?
Yeah.
Well, Chomsky loves thought experiments,
Ooh, I love those.
and one of his favorites is the Martian linguist.
I'm picturing a little green alien trying to decipher English.
Okay, so imagine this Martian is studying Spanish.
Okay.
He's looking at how questions are formed.
All right.
He sees sentences like, El hombre está en la casa, meaning, is the man at home?
Okay. Seems simple enough.
You just move the verb to the beginning and you've got a question.
Right.
Our Martian friend thinks he's figured it out,
He thinks he's got it.
but then he comes across a more complex sentence.
Oh.
El hombre que está contento está en la casa. The man who is happy is at home.
Oh.
So he tries to apply his rule and he gets, está el hombre que contento está en la casa.
And
That doesn't make any sense in Spanish.
so his rule didn't work.
Right, it was too simple. It was based only on word order.
So it's the real rule.
Well, human language isn't just about the sequence of words, it's about their structure.
There's more to it than meets the eye.
Right. The correct Spanish question is, está el hombre que está contento en la casa. See, it has the main verb that moves, not just the first verb.
Oh, I see.
To get this, you need to understand the whole sentence structure, not just the order of words.
So our brains are doing all this complex stuff without us realizing it.
Exactly. Chomsky calls this structure dependency.
Structured dependency.
It means that language operates on these hierarchical structures like branches of a tree.
Instead of just a straight line of words.
Right, and this structure dependency is another principle built into our universal grammar.
So it's not something we're taught.
No, it's something we just know.
It makes you think, if we learn purely through imitation and repetition, wouldn't we all be making the same mistakes as that Martian?
We would. But kids rarely make those kinds of mistakes.
Right.
And no one is explicitly teaching them about structure dependency.
So this knowledge really seems to be hardwired.
Part of our innate linguistic toolkit.
Okay, so language isn't just a simple skill.
Right.
There's this deep knowledge system at play.
Yeah.
But Chomsky takes it even further, right?
He does.
He goes into this world of empty categories.
That's where things get really interesting.
Empty categories sounds mysterious.
It is. Think of language like a play.
Okay.
Words are the actors on stage.
Right.
But there are also these unseen stagehands.
Stagehands.
Moving things around behind the scenes.
Okay.
Influencing the action without being seen.
I like that analogy.
They're shaping the play, but they're invisible to the audience.
So how does that work in language?
These invisible stagehands are what Chomsky calls empty categories. They're parts of the sentence structure that you can't hear.
You can't hear them.
But they still play a crucial role in the meaning.
So like phantom actors influencing the performance but not delivering any lines.
Exactly.
I like that.
One example is something called trace.
Trace.
Remember how in those Spanish questions the main verb moves?
Yeah, and our Martian friend got confused because he didn't get structured dependency.
Well, when that verb moves, it leaves behind an empty category, a trace, marking where it used to be. And even though we can't hear this trace, it still affects how we understand the sentence.
That's pretty subtle.
It is. It's like our brains are filling in the gaps using these invisible cues to make sense of things.
Could you give an example?
Sure. Let's look at the Spanish sentence. Juan se hizo afeitar, which means Juan had himself shaved.
Okay.
Now, on the surface, it seems like something's missing.
Like who actually did the shaving?
Exactly. You'd think it would need to be more explicit, like Juan had someone shave him.
Right.
But in this sentence, the reflexive pronoun se has moved to attach to the verb hizo, leaving a trace behind.
Okay.
This trace acts like the object of afeitar, even though we don't hear it.
Wow. Our brains are doing a lot of work behind the scenes.
They really are. Without this concept of trace, that sentence would sound wrong.
It wouldn't make sense.
It shows how complex language really is.
Yeah, and how much is going on beneath the surface.
All these elegant principles working together.
Right. And speaking of elegant principles, we can't forget about case theory.
Case theory, exactly.
Oh.
Imagine a linguistic ballet with words moving gracefully across a sentence.
Okay. Nouns and verbs twirling in perfect harmony.
Think of case theory as the choreographer.
All right, the choreographer.
It dictates how certain words, like verbs and prepositions, assign cases to other words.
Oh, cases. Like nominative, accusative, all that.
Yeah, it brings back memories of grammar class.
It does.
These cases are mostly invisible in English, marked only by word order.
But in other languages, they're more obvious.
Right. Like in Latin or German, you see them in the word endings.
So it's like each word is wearing the proper grammatical outfit.
Yeah. Exactly. A perfect analogy.
For its role in the sentence.
Case theory is crucial for making a sentence grammatical.
Okay.
And it helps us understand the structure and the meaning.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Take the sentence, the dog chased the cat.
Okay.
Classic. The verb chased assigns the nominative case to dog and the accusative case to cat.
Right.
Which tells us who's doing the chasing and who's being chased.
So all these invisible forces are shaping how we communicate.
It's amazing, isn't it?
It is. And it makes you realize how much deeper language is than we often think.
Absolutely.
It's not just about words and grammar.
It's a window into how our minds work.
Right. It's like Chomsky is using language as a tool.
To unlock the secrets of human cognition.
To understand how we think and learn and create.
Precisely. He's not just studying language.
He's using it to understand the human mind.
And as we go deeper into these ideas, a really big question comes up.
What's that?
The question of free will.
Oh, wow. That's a big one.
It is. If our minds are shaped by biology,
then how much free will do we really have?
That's the paradox Chomsky's wrestling with.
Yeah.
He knows it's a tough question.
But he doesn't think it means we have no agency.
Right. He thinks we need to make a distinction between our inherent capacities.
Like our potential.
And the specific choices we make.
Okay. I'm not sure I follow.
Well, think about our capacity for language.
Okay.
We're all born with the ability to learn any language.
Right.
But the specific language we learn depends on our environment.
The languages we're exposed to.
Exactly. It's like our genes give us a musical instrument,
I like that analogy.
but we get to choose the melody we play.
So it's not determinism versus free will.
Right.
It's about understanding how those two things work together.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Our biology might limit the range of choices.
But it doesn't dictate every single choice we make.
Right. We have the freedom to play different tunes, even if we're all playing on instruments with a similar design.
That makes sense. And this applies to more than just language, right? Like, even if we're hardwired for certain ways of thinking,
Like having a sense of fairness or justice.
we still have the freedom to choose how we act,
Precisely.
how we apply those principles in the real world.
That's Chomsky's point.
And he even suggests that our very idea of free will...
Might be limited by how our minds work.
Wait, what do you mean?
Imagine a creature with a completely different kind of mind.
Okay.
This creature might have totally different ideas about choice and agency, even about time, what we perceive as free will.
Might just be a product of our human perspective.
Exactly. It's like trying to explain color to someone who's been blind their whole life.
They could understand it in theory.
But they could never really grasp what it's like to see color.
So our understanding of free will could be limited by the structure of our own minds.
By the very nature of our human experience.
Wow, that's a humbling thought.
It is.
It makes you wonder what else might be out there.
What other parts of reality we might be missing?
Simply because of the limitations of our brains.
That's what makes Chomsky's work so fascinating.
It really pushes the boundaries.
By exploring the limits of language, we might actually learn about the limits of thought itself.
And maybe even get a glimpse of what lies beyond those limits.
It's like standing at the edge of a map.
And realizing there's a whole world beyond the charted territory.
Exactly. We can see the edges of our knowledge.
But we can only imagine what lies beyond.
That's a great analogy. And that spirit of exploration, that willingness to question everything,
To venture into the unknown.
that's at the heart of Chomsky's work.
He's not afraid to ask the tough questions.
Even if the answers are hard to find.
So it's not just about the mechanics of language.
No.
It's about using language as a tool to explore bigger mysteries.
The mysteries of the human mind.
And the universe we live in.
It's about pushing the boundaries of what we think is possible.
But it's also about recognizing that language isn't just theoretical.
Right.
It has real-world implications.
It shapes our world in powerful ways.
And this is where Chomsky's political activism comes in.
Exactly. He's not just an armchair linguist.
He's deeply engaged with social and political issues.
He sees a connection between language and power.
So how does that all tie together?
Well, he argues that language can be used as a tool to manipulate and control
To shape how people see the world.
and influence their actions.
Like propaganda and biased media,
Exactly.
which we see everywhere these days.
Those in power often use language to control the narrative.
To spin things in their favor.
Right. They might limit information.
Or use emotionally charged language.
To sway public opinion and maintain control.
It makes you wonder how much of what we believe
Is really our own.
and how much has been shaped by outside forces.
That's a question we all need to ask ourselves.
Chomsky encourages us to be critical thinkers
To question the information we're given.
and to challenge those who try to control the narrative.
Exactly.
So studying language can actually be a form of empowerment
Absolutely.
if we understand how language works
We can see through these manipulative tactics.
and think for ourselves. Exactly.
It's like learning the magician's tricks.
So we can see through the illusions.
But instead of a magic show.
It's the world of information and ideas.
Right.
And this is why education is so important.
Especially when it comes to language.
We need to teach young people how to think critically about language
To analyze its structure.
and understand how it can be used for good or for bad.
I'm curious, how much has Chomsky's work influenced how we teach language?
It's been hugely influential.
Really?
His theories have challenged those traditional methods.
You know, the ones that focus on rote memorization and drills.
Exactly. He emphasizes the need for more stimulating learning environments.
Environments that nurture kids' natural curiosity.
Right.
So less about memorizing grammar rules.
And more about creating opportunities for exploration and discovery.
It reminds me of how my kids learn to speak.
How is that?
It wasn't through flashcards or grammar lessons.
Yeah.
It was through playing and listening to stories.
And experimenting with sounds and words.
That's a perfect example. Instead of treating language like a dry subject,
We should be creating environments where kids can play with language.
experiment with different structures and discover the joy of communication.
It makes sense that that approach would be more effective
It is?
than just drilling rules into their heads.
Kids are natural language learners.
Right?
They come pre-wired with that language faculty.
Like we talked about.
They're always experimenting with language, asking why,
Yeah.
and testing boundaries
And our job is to encourage that.
to foster that natural curiosity.
So does this apply to learning a second language too?
Absolutely.
Really?
Chomsky's work has revolutionized second language teaching.
In what way?
Well, his insights about universal grammar suggest that all languages share this underlying structure.
So in theory, that should make it easier to learn new languages.
Right, but it's not quite that simple.
There's more to it than just recognizing the similarities.
Exactly. Each language has its own unique features and quirks.
Its own personality.
Right, it's not just about plugging in new vocabulary words.
It's about understanding the subtle differences in grammar and syntax.
And even the cultural context.
So to be truly fluent, you need more than just grammatical accuracy.
You need an intuitive feel for the language.
Like you can express yourself naturally and spontaneously.
Precisely.
So it's about understanding how the language works within a culture.
Exactly. And this brings us to another key aspect of Chomsky's work, the connection between language and culture.
The two are intertwined.
They are. He recognizes that language isn't just a neutral tool.
It's embedded in a social and historical context.
That shapes its meaning and how we use it.
So to really get a language, you need to understand the culture it came from.
You need to see the whole picture.
It's like language carries the history and values of its speakers.
That's a great way to put it. Each language has a wealth of cultural knowledge embedded in it,
Reflecting how people see the world.
and how they interact with each other.
And that's essential for communicating across cultures.
It is. If we don't understand the cultural context,
We're bound to misinterpret things,
then that leads to miscommunication and misunderstandings.
which can cause all sorts of problems.
Exactly. Chomsky emphasizes the importance of approaching other cultures with humility and respect.
Because our own biases can cloud our judgment.
They can. So learning a new language isn't just about expanding your vocabulary.
It's about expanding your worldview
It's about learning to empathize with others.
and appreciate different ways of being.
Exact.
It seems like Chomsky's work is about so much more than just linguistics.
It is.
It's about the power of language to shape our thoughts and our societies.
And our future.
So what's the one key takeaway you'd like listeners to get from this deep dive into Chomsky?
If I had to sum it up in one sentence, I'd say language is a mirror reflecting the beauty and complexity of the human mind.
That's beautiful.
By studying language, we can understand ourselves better.
Our potential for creativity and connection.
And our responsibility to use this gift wisely.
Language is more than just a tool for communication.
It shapes our world.
And how we understand it.
It's a gift, a responsibility, and a source of endless fascination.
Well said. As Chomsky himself said, the limits of my language are the limits of my world.
That's one of his most famous quotes.
It is. It encourages us to push those limits.
To learn new languages.
To engage with different cultures.
And to use the power of language to make the world a better place.
Absolutely.
A more just and compassionate world.
What a wonderful thought to end on.
It is.
That's a wrap on this deep dive into the world of Noam Chomsky. We hope you've enjoyed exploring the intricate connections between language knowledge and the power of the human mind. Until next time, happy exploring. So these invisible stagehands are like moving the scenery and props.
Yeah, they're shaping the play without the audience ever seeing them.
Right. So how do these invisible stagehands work in language?
They're what Chomsky calls empty categories.
Empty categories.
They're parts of a sentence that don't have a sound.
You can't actually hear them.
Right, but they still affect the meaning.
It's like they're these phantom actors influencing the play without having any lines.
Exactly. And one example is something called trace.
Trace.
Remember those Spanish questions, how the main verb moves to the front?
Yeah, and our Martian friend had trouble with that.
Right. He didn't get the structure dependence.
Well, when that verb moves...
It leaves an empty category behind,
Okay, it leaves a trace.
marking its original position.
So even though we can't hear it...
This trace still affects how we interpret the sentence.
That's so subtle.
It is. Our brains are filling in the gaps
Using these invisible cues.
to make sense of the language.
Do you have an example?
Sure. Let's take this Spanish sentence. Juan se hizo afeitar, which means Juan had himself shaved.
Okay.
Now, at first glance, it seems like something's missing.
Like who did the shaving?
Exactly. You'd think it would be more explicit, like Juan had someone shave him.
Right.
But in this sentence, the reflexive pronoun se has moved.
Okay.
It's attached to the verb hizo.
Leaving a trace behind.
Exactly. And this trace acts as the object of the verb affior.
Even though we don't hear it.
That's right.
Wow. So our brains are really doing a lot of complex stuff.
They are. And without this concept of trace,
That sentence would be ungrammatical.
it just wouldn't sound right.
It shows you how much complexity there is in language.
And how much is happening beneath the surface
All these principles working together.
to create meaning.
Right. And speaking of principles, we can't forget about case theory.
Case theory, right? Picture this. A linguistic ballet
Okay.
where words are moving gracefully across the sentence.
Like a carefully choreographed dance.
Exact.
Nouns and verbs twirling in harmony.
Well, think of case theory as the choreographer.
Okay, the choreographer.
It dictates how certain words, like verbs and prepositions, assign cases to other words.
Cases like nominative, accusative, those things?
Exactly. You remember those from grammar class?
I do.
In English, these cases are mostly invisible.
They're just marked by the word order.
Right. But in languages like Latin or German,
They're more explicit.
you see them in the word endings.
So it's like each word is wearing the right grammatical outfit
A perfect analogy.
for its role in the sentence.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Case theory ensures that the sentence is grammatically correct.
And it helps us understand the meaning.
All right. Let's look at an example. The dog chased the cat.
A classic.
The verb chased assigns the nominative case to dog
Uh-huh.
and the accusative case to cat.
So that tells us who's doing the chasing.
And who's being chased.
It's amazing how all these invisible forces.
Shape how we communicate.
It really is, and it highlights how deep language goes.
It's not just about words and grammar. It's a window into the human mind
It's like Chomsky's using language as a tool
to unlock the secrets of human cognition.
to understand how we think, how we learn, how we create.
Precisely. It's not just about language itself.
It's about using language to understand what it means to be human.
Exactly. And as we delve deeper into these ideas, we bump into this really profound question.
Oh, what is it?
The question of free will.
Free will. That's a big one.
It is. If our minds are shaped by biology.
How much free will do we really have?
It's a fascinating paradox. Chomsky's trying to unravel.
Yeah, it's a tough one.
It is.
Yeah.
But he doesn't think it negates human agency.
He still thinks we have choices.
Right. He suggests we need to distinguish between our inherent capabilities
Like our potential.
and the specific choices we make.
Okay, I'm not sure I'm following.
Let me explain. Think about our capacity for language.
Okay.
We're all born with the potential to learn any language.
Right, but we only end up speaking a few.
Exactly. The specific language we learn,
Depends on our environment.
on the languages we're exposed to as children.
Okay.
It's like our genes provide us with a musical instrument.
I like that analogy.
But we get to choose the melody we play.
So it's not about determinism versus free will.
Right.
It's about understanding how they interact.
Exactly. Our biology might constrain our choices.
But it doesn't dictate every single decision we make.
We have the freedom to play different tunes.
Even if we're all playing on similar instruments.
That's a great way to put it.
And this applies to more than just language, right?
Absolutely.
It applies to how we think and how we act.
It does.
Like even if we're hardwired for certain ways of thinking.
Like having a sense of fairness.
Or a sense of justice.
We still have the freedom to choose how we act.
To choose how we apply those principles in the real world.
Exactly. That's precisely Chomsky's point.
And he even suggests that our very notion of free will,
Might be limited by our own minds.
our own minds,
You mean like
like our understanding of what free will is.
could be constrained by how we think?
Imagine a creature with a completely different kind of mind.
Okay. A different kind of intelligence.
This creature might have a totally different concept of choice,
An agency.
even of time, what we perceive as free will.
Might just be a product of our human perspective.
It might be limited by our own cognitive structure.
It's like trying to explain color to someone who's been blind since birth.
They could understand the concept intellectually, but they could never really grasp what it's like to see.
Exactly.
So our understanding of free will could be limited
By the very structure of our minds.
by the very nature of being human.
That's a humbling thought, isn't it?
It is. It makes you realize how much we don't know,
And how much might be beyond our grasp.
simply because of the limitations of our brains.
That's what makes exploring these ideas so exciting.
It's like standing at the edge of a map.
And realizing the world extends far beyond the charted territory.
We can see the edges of our knowledge.
But we can only imagine what lies beyond.
That's a beautiful way to put it, and that spirit of exploration.
That willingness to question assumptions.
and venture into the unknown.
That's what drives Chomsky's work,
He's not afraid to ask the tough questions.
even if the answers are elusive.
So it's not just about understanding the mechanics of language.
No.
It's about using language as a tool
To explore the deeper mysteries of the human mind,
and the universe we inhabit.
to push the boundaries of what we think is possible.
But it's also about recognizing that language isn't just theoretical.
Right.
It has a real impact on our world.
It shapes how we think and how we act.
And this is where Chomsky's political activism comes into play.
Exactly.
He's not just a scholar in an ivory tower.
He's deeply engaged with the world,
He sees a profound connection between language and power.
and he's not afraid to speak out against injustice.
So how does that all connect with his ideas about language?
Well, he argues that language can be used to manipulate and control people
To shape how they see the world,
and influence their actions,
like through propaganda,
or biased media coverage.
which we see all around us,
Those in power often use language to control the narrative,
to present their version of events.
but to maintain their power,
They might restrict access to information
or use emotionally charged language.
to sway public opinion.
Exactly.
So it makes you wonder how much of what we believe
Is truly our own.
and how much has been shaped by these external forces.
It's a question we should all be asking ourselves.
Chomsky encourages us to be critical thinkers
To question the information we're given,
and to challenge those who try to control the narrative.
to think for ourselves.
So in a way, studying language can be empowering
It can.
if we understand how language works
We can see through these manipulative tactics.
and make our own judgments.
It's like learning the magician's tricks
So we can see through the illusions.
and appreciate the artistry behind them.
But instead of a magic show.
It's the world of information and ideas.
And that's why education is so important.
It is. Especially education about language,
We need to teach young people how to think critically about language
to analyze its structure.
and to understand how it can be used for both good and bad. I'm curious, how much has Chomsky's work influenced how we teach language these days?
It's had a huge impact.
Really?
It's challenged the traditional methods that focus on rote memorization.
And endless drills.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Chomsky emphasizes the importance of creating stimulating learning environments.
Environments that nurture children's natural curiosity about language.
Right.
So less about forcing kids to memorize grammar rules.
And more about giving them opportunities to explore and discover those rules for themselves.
That reminds me of how my kids learned to speak.
How was that?
It wasn't through flashcards or grammar lessons.
No.
It was through playing, listening to stories.
And just experimenting with different sounds and words.
Exactly. They were naturally curious.
And that's how we learn best.
It seems like that approach would be much more effective
It is.
than just drilling rules into their heads.
Children are natural language learners.
Right.
They come pre-wired with that language faculty we talked about.
Right.
They're constantly experimenting, testing boundaries, asking why,
Our job is to encourage that.
to nurture that curiosity.
So does this approach apply to learning a second language as well?
Absolutely.
Really?
Chomsky's work has revolutionized the field of second language teaching.
That's fascinating.
In what way?
His insights about universal grammar. You mean the idea that all languages share a common underlying structure?
Exactly. That suggests that learning a new language,
Should be easier than we think.
in theory, it should be.
But of course, there's more to it than that.
Right.
Each language has its own unique features and quirks.
Same personality.
Though it's not just about plugging in new vocabulary words.
No, it's about understanding the subtle differences in grammar and syntax.
And even the cultural context.
Exactly.
True fluency isn't just about grammatical accuracy.
Yeah.
It's about developing a feel for the language.
And intuition.
The ability to express yourself naturally and spontaneously.
Chomsky emphasizes that fluency is more than just knowing the rules.
It's about understanding how a language is used within a culture.
Exactly. And this brings us to another important aspect of Chomsky's work.
The connection between language and culture.
He recognizes that language isn't just a neutral tool
It's embedded in a social and historical context.
that shapes its meaning.
And how we use it. So to truly understand a language,
You need to understand the culture it came from.
you need to see the whole picture.
It's like language carries the history and values of its speakers.
It's a reflection of their worldview.
Each language contains a wealth of cultural knowledge.
That's fascinating. And that understanding is crucial.
For effective communication across cultures,
If we don't understand the cultural context,
we're likely to misinterpret things
leading to misunderstandings and conflict.
Chomsky stresses the importance of approaching other cultures with humanity,
With respect,
recognizing that our own linguistic and cultural biases,
can distort our perceptions.
they can.
It seems like learning a new language isn't just about expanding your vocabulary.
It's about expanding your worldview.
It's about developing empathy and understanding for other cultures.
It's about seeing the world through different eyes.
It's about recognizing our shared humanity.
And appreciating the diversity of human experience.
Chomsky's work is so much more than just linguistics.
It is.
It's about the power of language to shape our thoughts.
Our societies.
And our future.
It's about recognizing our responsibility as language users.
We can use language to spread misinformation and hate.
Or we can use it to promote understanding and compassion.
It's a powerful tool.
It is.
So what's the one key takeaway you'd like listeners to remember from this deep dive into Chomsky's work?
If I had to boil it down to one sentence, I'd say language is a mirror reflecting the beauty and complexity of the human mind.
That's beautiful.
By studying language, we can gain a deeper understanding of ourselves.
Our potential for creativity and connection.
And our responsibility to use this incredible gift wisely.
Language is more than just a tool for communication.
It's a force that shapes our world.
And how we understand it.
It's a gift, a responsibility, and a source of endless fascination.
As Chomsky himself said, the limits of my language mean the limits of my world.
That's one of his most famous quotes.
It encourages us to push those limits.
To learn new languages.
To engage with different cultures.
And to use the power of language to build a better world.
A more just and compassionate world.
That's exactly.
What a wonderful thought to end on. It's fascinating how these deep philosophical questions about free will emerge from something as seemingly basic as language.
It is. Chomsky always challenges us to think beyond the surface.
To consider the bigger picture.
To question our assumptions about the world and ourselves.
So where do we go from here? What's the next step in this exploration of language and knowledge?
Well, Chomsky argues that understanding these underlying principles of language,
these principles of universal grammar,
is crucial for creating more effective approaches to education.
So it's not just about theoretical linguistics.
No. It has practical applications in the real world.
Especially in how we teach language to children and adults.
Exactly. He challenges those traditional methods.
You know, the ones that rely on rote memorization and drills.
He advocates for a more interactive and engaging approach to language learning.
An approach that taps into our innate capacity for language.
Right. Remember that language faculty we talked about?
Our built-in blueprint for language.
Yeah. Chomsky believes that children are natural language learners.
They're curious and eager to explore.
We need to create learning environments that nurture that curiosity.
Environments that encourage experimentation and discovery.
Rather than just forcing kids to memorize rules.
So it's about fostering a love of language.
Exactly. Making it fun and engaging.
Instead of a chore.
It's about tapping into that innate capacity for language that we all possess.
And does this apply to learning a second language as well?
Absolutely.
So how do we apply these principles in that context?
Well, Chomsky's work suggests that all languages share this underlying structure.
This universal grammar.
Which means that learning a new language
might not be as daunting as we think.
It's not just about memorizing vocabulary and grammar rules.
It's about understanding the deeper principles that govern all languages.
And then applying those principles to the specific language you're learning.
So it's about finding the connections.
Common threads that run through all human languages.
That's fascinating. It seems like there's so much more to language learning than we realize.
There is, and Chomsky emphasizes that true fluency
goes beyond just grammatical accuracy.
It's about developing an intuitive feel for the language.
Like you can think and express yourself naturally.
Almost effortlessly.
Like you're not translating in your head.
Exactly. It's about internalizing the language.
So it becomes a part of you.
And that's where the cultural context comes in.
Right. Language is always embedded in a culture.
It reflects the values, beliefs, and worldview of its speakers.
So to really master a language, you need to understand the culture it came from.
You need to see the whole picture.
And that requires more than just studying textbooks and grammar rules.
It requires immersion in the culture.
Interacting with native speakers.
Experiencing the language in its natural environment.
It's like language is a key that unlocks a whole new world.
A world of different perspectives and ways of seeing things.
And by learning a new language,
we expand our own horizons.
We break down barriers.
And we build bridges between cultures.
It's a powerful reminder that language is more than just a tool for communication.
It's a force that shapes our understanding of the world.
And our place in it.
It has the power to unite us.
Or to divide us.
It all depends on how we choose to use it.
That's a profound thought. It seems like Chomsky's work ultimately boils down to a question of responsibility.
It does. We have a responsibility to use language wisely,
To promote understanding and compassion.
rather than spreading misinformation and hate.
To use language as a tool for building a better world.
A world where communication fosters empathy and connection.
And where we celebrate the diversity of human languages and cultures.
What a wonderful vision.
And a powerful reminder of the transformative potential of language.
I think that's a great place to leave it.
It is. It's a reminder that language is a gift, a responsibility, and an endless source of fascination.
We hope you've enjoyed this deep dive into the world of Noam Chomsky.
We've explored his groundbreaking ideas about language knowledge and the power of the human mind.
And we hope this deep dive has inspired you to continue exploring these fascinating questions.
To keep questioning, keep learning, and keep using the power of language to make the world a better place.
Until next time, happy exploring.